Well, we've told you rather more than you need to know about the physiology and the psychology of colour. What about the television part of the business? In designing a colour television system, we really have to begin at the end. We have to begin with a colour display tube. Unlike the artist, who can choose his palette of colours to suit the particular scene that he's going to paint, we have a very restricted palette which we can use, and having decided what it is we're going to use, we have to use it for all scenes. The particular palette which we choose to use, as in this next slide, is in fact a palette consisting of only red, green and blue. So our colour television display tube has to reproduce red, green and blue. Need only reproduce red, green and blue, but not any red, green or blue. In fact, the precise shade of red and green and blue, which our colour display tube reproduces, dominates the design of the colour television cameras and the rest of the system. Now, how do we in fact get three separate colours into one display tube? It's very easy. We squeeze three monochrome tubes into a colour tube. We've a model over here in the corner of the studio to show you, which I'll walk over to now. And we've used coloured lights rather than electron beams. But at the back of the colour cathode ray tube, which is off the top of your picture in this illustration, we have three electron guns, one conveying the red information, one the green, one the blue. And we've represented these by lights. And were we to allow all three to shine onto the screen of the tube at once, then of course we should see just a jumble of colours, as my pointer is indicating now. But by the very simple process of interposing between our electron guns and our cathode ray tube screen a layer of steel which is peppered with tiny holes, we can make sure that each electron gun, in firing through the holes in the steel plate, fires from the green electron gun electrons which only hit the green glowing phosphor dots. Similarly, if we modulate the red information, then the electrons which are going through the hole in the screen will only modulate the red glowing phosphor dots. And in principle, we then have complete control of our colour television picture. I say in principle, there's rather more to it than I've explained, of course. A few rather tedious details, such as the fact that we need about 1 1/3 million phosphor dots on the cathode ray tube rather than the 3 which I showed you there. But nevertheless, the thing is quite capable of being made and produces very satisfactory pictures. Such a scene, of course, is in fact made up of a separate green, red and blue field. Let us show you just the green field. And we'll put back the remaining fields one at a time. Until we're back to the complete colour picture again. Now, all this is done with 1.25 million little phosphor dots. Let's try and show you these phosphor dots separately by holding a magnifying glass in front of a colour cathode display tube on which, in fact, we are showing a colour bar signal. Over to the magnifying glass. Now, I mentioned the steel plate behind the screen, which is sorting out the red, green and blue images so that they don't get mixed up. I'd like to show you one of these screens. It's peppered with some 400,000 tiny holes and is probably the nearest thing to transparent steel which we can produce. I'll hold it over the cathode ray tube at which you've just been looking, the one with the colour bar signal on it, because the moire patterns which this steel shadow mask produces with the phosphor dots which are already on the screen is rather interesting. You see, the two patterns beat together and, in fact, magnify the phosphor dot structure for you, rather as the magnifying glass did. That's the colour display tube. Having decided how we're going to make the colour display tube, we can turn our attention to the colour camera. Now, the colour camera, as we can show you on this slide, basically dissects the picture into its separate red, green and blue images, and then for good measure these days we generally throw in a fourth picture, a normal black and white picture, which serves to produce a compatible picture on everyone's black and white receiver. These four images are produced from the light coming through one lens, normally a zoom lens, and the light is split up, all done with mirrors of course, after it's come out of the lens, and four separate images are put onto four monochrome camera tubes. Let's have a look at the mirrors which do this splitting up. They're really prisms, and the white light coming in from the bottom is split up into four separate parts: a white patch, an orangey red patch, a green patch and a blue patch. And we put a normal type black and white camera pickup tube where each of those patches fall, and we get out a practically normal black and white television signal from each of these images. That's the theory. What about the practice? Let's show you what a colour camera looks like. This is the camera operator's view of his camera. There are a number of knobs to allow very sophisticated servo control of the zoom lens. The whole camera, as you can see, is not a great deal larger than a monochrome camera, certainly if we're talking of a monochrome camera of a few years ago. But nevertheless, inside it is packed really 4 times the equivalent of a monochrome camera. There are 4 separate camera tubes, rather small ones, which we call plumbicons, 4 sets of electronics, and the camera gives us out 4 different signals, each one looking very much like a normal television signal, but one of these signals is carrying the black and white information, and the other 3 are carrying the separate red, green and blue information. Not all cameras have 4 tubes. Some of them make do with just 3. Now we come to a problem. We have 4 television signals. We only have 1 monochrome television transmission channel down which to radiate these 4 signals. How do we get 2 quarts into a pint pot? Well, we have to fall back on some of the known deficiencies in the eye in order not to send any more information than we really need to. I'd like to show you a diagram of just how we code these 4 signals for transmission. We have to change the 4 signals into 1 signal. We do it by sending the signal from the black and white tube, the compatible monochrome signal, more or less unaltered. Then we take the red, green and blue signals, we pass them into a circuit called a matrix, and from these 3 signals we generate just 2 signals. We are in fact subtracting the luminance signal from the red, green and blue signal, so that we're not sending information down the colouring channel, which is repeating information which is going down the compatible monochrome signal channel. However, we still have 2 extra signals to squeeze onto our black and white signal. We do this by changing the signals into little dots. Little dots which you can see on your black and white receivers on close inspection, subcarrier dots we call them, and these subcarrier dots are in effect carrying the coding of the colouring information. We add these little dots to the normal black and white picture. You hardly see them on your black and white set, but the colour receiver can sort out these dots from the black and white signal and deduce the original colour signals again. So we are in effect scrambling the information rather as we might scramble a secret telephone message. Let me show you what this means in practice as far as the picture is concerned. If we take a normal picture, all 3 colours present, we switch off the subcarrier dots. And you'll see we're left with a normal black and white picture. Let's do the reverse of this. Let us put the subcarrier back. Let us now take away the brightness information, the luminance signal. And if we adjust the black level controls of the transmission, you should be able to see a rather fuzzy coloured image which has very little brightness variation in it and certainly isn't sharp. But nevertheless, a combination of this chrominance signal, as we call it, this colouring signal, with the sharp black and white signal produces a reasonably satisfactory picture. We put back the luminance signal, we're back to our full colour picture again. That's how it's done. Oh, there's more to it, of course, and I've had time to tell you more to it than you need to know. So let us now turn our attention away from the mechanics of television to how well it works. Our colour television system is very good indeed, but it's not perfect. Of course, each individual colour camera, like everyone else in the studio, has its own point of view. They're all a little different, but there are certain consistent errors in the system, which, although I'm sure they're not obvious to most viewers, are sometimes important, for example, in advertising pack shots. Let's have a look at some of these errors. We'll try and illustrate them to you, but you'll realise, of course, that this has to be a rather artificial demonstration because we can't show you the original colours. Now, one of the basic errors in the system is that purple colours tend to be reproduced rather too blue. There are a number of reasons for this, ranging from the colour white, which we use on colour receivers, to the lack of red sensitivity of our Plumbicon tubes. Another typical type of error is that blue-green colours tend to come out rather too blue. We've exaggerated it a little on this caption in order to ram the point home to you. Perhaps the only other colour error which we need mention is the fact that some greens tend to desaturate. This is mainly due to the colour receiver display tube itself, where the green phosphor isn't as saturated as we would like it to be. The effects, though, by and large, on most pictures, are not noticeable to you. There are some effects which are noticeable. Television metamerism is one of them. You'll remember, in case you can't remember, we'll show you a slide. You'll remember that some colours which look alike under one lighting look differently under a different lighting. In the same way, two colours, two costumes, two flats, two pieces of hair, which look the same to the eye, may in fact look different to the television camera. Now, I've also mentioned at some length, I'm afraid, the importance of viewing conditions. If you look at your pictures under the wrong conditions, they won't look quite as the director intended them to look when he or she approved them in the control room. Colour television pictures are rather more susceptible to ambient lighting and to viewing conditions than are monochrome pictures. This is partly because they're in colour, partly because our colour television display tubes aren't yet as bright as our monochrome tubes. Now, traditionally for monochrome, we look at our pictures in control rooms against a rather dark background. For colour television, we're changing this. We're having more light in the control rooms, more light behind the screens, being very much more careful about reflections and so on. And this is how you should look at your pictures at home if you wish to see just the effect which the director intended you to. I'd like to make a particular point here to advertisers. Please don't look at your films for television in a normal dark cinema with a CinemaScope screen. We'd like you to look rather as in this next slide, where we are showing a rather small picture against an illuminated surround. Now, the point of the illuminated surround is that your eye shouldn't wander in colour balance. It should be stabilized by the surround, which makes you much more critical of the grading of the film. And the very presence of the surround depresses the black parts of the picture rather in the same way as the television system is going to. So, please don't grumble about the pictures you're seeing unless you're quite sure you're looking at them properly. It's a good excuse for us, isn't it? There's another effect which is absolutely basic to all colour television systems, which I'd like to demonstrate to you. It's called cross colour. It's basic to our PAL television system, although in fact it's not quite so bad on PAL as it is on the American NTSC system. We're going to show you now a resolution chart. I'd particularly draw your attention to the two vertical wedges, as we call them, of converging black and white lines. And I think you'll see a very pronounced colour effect towards the narrow ends of these wedges if we've put in the subcarrier, as we'll now do. Now, this effect is called cross colour. It's the receiver misinterpreting some of the high-frequency black and white information as colouring information, because you remember we've put our 2 quarts into a pint pot. The effect is always present, not usually noticeable on a colour picture unless you have a particularly fine pattern on suitings or perhaps net stockings and they're moving. We just have to learn to live with that one, I'm afraid. We have a number of controls in colour television which perhaps I should explain to you. So let's go over to my overworked secretary in order to demonstrate some of these effects to you. We begin by adjusting black level. Now, the adjustment of black level, which is probably labelled brightness on your television receivers, is quite the most critical adjustment which can be made to the system, both at our end and at your receiver. So please be very precise and careful about the black level or brightness adjustment. We can also alter the contrast in the picture, which we'll now do for you. And again, you'll find it pays on your receiver to adjust the contrast as precisely as you can. You also have on your receivers a control labeled saturation. We talked about saturation. We don't have this control in our studios, at least we're careful to keep it under lock and key. We take great care to transmit our pictures at a very precise level of saturation. However, there are some things which we have difficulty in controlling very precisely. One of them is the exact hue of the human face. Let's take another look at Anne. We might, in the studio, have 5 different cameras, all taking various versions of perhaps the same scene, or similar scenes. And we do our best, and it takes us quite a long time, because there's an awful lot of knobs to twiddle, to make all our cameras look exactly the same, so that the viewer is not conscious when we're changing from one camera to another. We don't always succeed, but we try very hard. Let's demonstrate this effect to you by showing you a split-screen version from 2 different cameras, both looking at Anne. And we'll move our paint box controls on one camera so that we're changing the colour of her face. And we bring it back again until you can't see the difference between the 2 halves of the picture. Well, this problem of picture matching between cameras is a very vital one in television. The same problem arises, of course, in producing a program this week and another program next week, and then transmitting them adjacent to each other. The same problem arises in trying to match the 15 different program companies around the network. The same problem arises in matching our pictures to BBC pictures. So we're very conscious of this, but it is a problem.
In colour film, we're concerned with exactly the same problems of recording and reproducing the 3 colour aspects, red, green and blue, of the original scene, as have been already outlined by Dr. Townsend. However, film, unlike colour television, reproduces colour by the subtractive system, and all modern materials are of the type known as integral tripack. That is, they contain 3 separate layers of emulsion which carry the 3 colour images on a single strip of film, as is shown in the following demonstration. Now, if a scene such as this is photographed onto colour negative material, the 3 layers of light-sensitive emulsion, which we see here in section under the microscope, respectively record in their complementary colours Firstly, the red light component of the scene, now the green light component, and the blue light components. Although normally, of course, these three records are never seen separately, as I've just shown, but appear combined as this single complete color negative after processing. Now, when a print is made from this negative, three similar emulsion layers on the print stock again record the information. The red negative record, which we see here, is reproduced in the positive as a blue-green or cyan image. The green record of the negative reproduces as a reddish-purple or magenta image, and from the negative recording the blue light, we produce a yellow positive print. And it is these three color-positive images superimposed in the print film which give the reproduction of the original scene. Now, when making prints, the laboratory can alter the proportions of the red, green, and blue components of the printing light by using three light valves, which we see in this diagram, and which control the separated red, green, and blue beams from the lamp. By so doing, what is termed the balance of the color print can be altered. For example, if we make the yellow image too heavy, the result looks like this. With too much yellow and magenta, it becomes too dark and red. And if all three are equally heavy, it's much too dark. Too much yellow and cyan, of course, make it dark and green. But not enough magenta also makes it green, but this time too light. Now, this shows the effect of too little yellow and magenta. And here, all the three images are too light. But of course, these are all very large and obvious changes. The steps which are normally used are very much smaller and are called printer points. And here we will see the effect of a number of single printer point changes varying between magenta and green. That one minus a magenta, back to normal, plus a green, normal, a magenta, and minus a green. Seen in this way, of course, even these changes are obvious enough. But if I now divide them by some completely different and suitably distracting material, you'll be much less aware of the same variations. But now, of course, none of them seem to match satisfactorily. It is to avoid effects such as this that the operation of grading, which is the selection of the color balance of each scene of a cut reel to give a satisfactory uniform color reproduction throughout, is such a very important part of film laboratory operations. And here it is necessary to work in even smaller steps, down to what are called half-point increments, which are really quite small in their visual effect. By this point, you may have realized that the color balance of the scene on the screen has been changing in these half-point steps while I have been speaking. And when we come back suddenly to our original level, as we shall do in a moment, you will see how much we've changed. That is a change of the order of 2 points, but as I say, affected in half-point increments. Although in the darkened conditions of the cinema, the eye tends to accommodate itself to these small differences of color balance, conditions of television viewing are much more critical, and uniformity of grading must be very accurate indeed. Now, another problem is the limited tonal range which a television receiver can reproduce. Very dark and high contrast scenes such as these, whether they are studio shots or day for night exteriors, although undoubtedly very dramatically effective in the cinema, will not very clearly give satisfactory results on telecine. In a scene such as this, which looked perfectly good under darkened theatre conditions with optical projection, the result is just hopeless. Everything must be done to keep to a moderate contrast of lighting and subject matter in the original photography. It may be desirable to make prints for television on special low contrast positive film stock, which gives lower density in the shadow areas, which may be seen here, but in fact, a very heavy, high, low-key shot will not be adequate even with low contrast stock. The low contrast effect has, of course, some reduction of brightness of saturated colors, and the results do appear somewhat too flat and washed out when viewed under normal cinema projection conditions. Well, to summarize at this point, film for television must be photographed avoiding unduly high contrast in both lighting and subject matter. Remember that the character of the original photography is a most important factor, since all that the laboratory can do is to make use of the best possible low contrast printing material, and that they cannot make changes to compensate for high contrast in the original photography. The grading of color prints for television is such a critical factor that whenever test scenes are photographed, it's most desirable to include a short section showing a grayscale or neutral object, such as we've just been viewing in these test scenes. This allows the laboratory to measure the color balance in the resultant print, as well as judge it subjectively, and can be of very great assistance. Now, all the demonstrations that I've shown you so far have been in the form of prints made directly from the original negative, exactly as it was photographed. But in advertising films, trick effects of one type or another are often an absolutely essential feature, whether they represent merely a straightforward superimposition of a title on a background scene, or whether they extend to much more elaborate multi-image traveling matte shots. This means that dupe negatives, or intermediates as they are termed in color processing, have to be made. Now, here we have a print from the original scene of the original negative, and here is a print from a color intermediate with color letter titles superimposed. And this is a reversal intermediate. Now we'll repeat that group again, just to show you the differences. Here is the print from the original negative, a print from a color intermediate with superimposed titles, and a print from a reversal intermediate. These last examples emphasize that although you can expect in color the whole range of optical effects and special processes which you have come to expect in black and white, they do introduce some special features of color reproducing and matching. For example, it may not always be possible to obtain an absolutely exact match of the advertiser's pack from shot to shot if some of the scenes are original negative and some are intermediates. Telecine will emphasize small differences which could have been accepted in the cinema theatre. Again, remember that a good quality intermediate cannot be made from original negative which has been badly over or underexposed, or which shows excessive subject or lighting contrast. And finally, in assessing the results from the laboratory, remember that a print made specially to suit telecine is likely to look too flat and too light in the shadow areas when viewed under regular cinema conditions in a darkened review room. Such prints for television really can only be critically judged on a correctly lined up standard telecine channel. But as an alternative, you can make use of the special optical projection conditions which reproduce the characteristics of television viewing and which have already been mentioned by Dr. Townsend. Television simulators of this type will be of increasing importance in assessing color prints of films made for television and should always be used when lined up standard telecine conditions are not immediately available.